Finding the right language teacher is not a simple task. You have a lot of them to choose from and many features to consider, such as their price per hour, their ratings, and their years of experience. Thus, you'll sometimes get it wrong and end up with an instructor you do not like. I've been using ITALKI for more than 2 years now, so I've had enough time to choose some bad teachers along the way and to figure out how to avoid them. In today's video, I've tried to pack all the learnings I've made on this platform in order to explain you how I try to find a great language instructor whenever I start learning a new language. So first of all, I would like to briefly outline why I decided to make a video on this topic. The reason being that our language teacher is a very important factor for determining our language learning success. They should give us the necessary encouragement, provide us with the right language learning materials, as well as tell us what we should study, read, and listen to. Picking the right teacher is thus a very important decision. We should take our time to choose the right one, because going for the wrong instructor might make us waste a lot of time. Think of it, that would mean having to start searching all over again and then getting to know the teacher and his or her method. We probably want to avoid that and instead just make the right choice on the first attempt and stick to it. And for that, I'd say that the wisest thing you can do is to have one trial lesson with the teacher before booking several lessons with him or her. The reason being that you do not want to make such an important decision after just having a look at one teacher's profile. You need to talk to them first to get to know each other and find out, for instance, if they have a personality you like, if you get along with them well, or if they are reliable people. But if you only do this with one teacher, you're not optimizing your chances of getting the best possible coach out there. I'd say that it's smarter to try out a bunch of instructors in order to increase your likelihood of finding an excellent one. And this is exactly what I do. So I usually have a look at several profiles on iTalki and then book one 30-minute class with between 3 and 6 of them. And now I'm going to tell you what features I usually pay close attention to during this screening phase. The most important one is the prices they charge. So I usually go for the teachers that are the cheapest, although I'm aware that they are probably not going to be as good as the teachers that charge a higher cost per hour. I can tell you from experience that you can still find pretty decent instructors on this low price range. And if you happen not to like any of these cheap teachers, then don't worry, because you're just trying them out. You can have a look at a few more profiles and book a lesson with an instructor that is a little bit more expensive. The second criteria I'll have a look at is whether they are community tutors or professional teachers. So each teacher on the platform has been labeled in either of those ways. Professional teachers have training as educators or boast extensive teaching experience, whereas community tutors do not have any official teaching certification and thus can only offer conversation practices on iTalki's website. By definition, professional teachers are more likely to be better coaches, right? So they have studied the language for a few years. Teaching might probably be their full-time job, and they are more likely to be passionate about it. Having said that, being a professional teacher does not guarantee that you're going to be a good instructor, and at the same time, being a community tutor does not necessarily imply that you're going to be a bad coach. But those outcomes are more likely to be the case. This is why whenever I find an affordable professional teacher, I'll probably book a lesson with him or her. So after spending a good half an hour scrolling through a lot of iTalki teachers, selecting between 3 and 5 of them, and booking a class with them, I move on to the approach phase. Now it's time to send them all a short introductory message, and in this section I'll explain what I write there and why I do this. As to the why, well, you can probably guess that I want to let the teacher know a little bit about myself. I want to highlight, among others, what my current level in the language is, what my learning goals are, and what topics I'm interested in. There's a second reason, maybe the most important one, which is that doing this exercise is a very good way of getting acquainted with this new foreign language. So in case I'm just starting out with that tongue, I'll obviously not be able to write it, right? What I'll do in these cases is just to write the text in English and then use DeepL to translate it. So that I might read it out loud a couple of times in the target language and maybe write down a few words I deem worth learning. This might take me around 45 minutes or even more, but I'd say that it's definitely worth the time, because you're learning how to introduce yourself in the foreign language and a few essential words, as well as how to conjugate a few verbs. The final reason as to why I write this text and send it out to the teachers is that it will save me some time when I have the lesson with that instructor. So the first class with a language coach is usually about introducing yourself, explaining why you want to learn that language, what your goals are, and this kind of stuff. But if you have already answered that question previously, then you can start the class at full blast and use your time time with the teacher more efficiently. So after doing all of this, the screening, booking the lessons, and sending out the introductory message, it's time now for the trial lessons. This is probably the most important part of this whole selection process, because you're really going to get a feeling of whether this person is a good teacher or not. During these first classes, I'm on the lookout for warning signs, and now I'm going to explain you what are the 3 most relevant red flags I try to detect. The first red flag would be if I notice that the teacher has not read the message I sent her a few days before the class. So apart from all of the benefits I laid out about sending an intro message, there's an added one. Namely, that it's a good way to find out whether the teacher is serious about what he's doing. If that were the case, the instructor should probably have taken notes of what I said, and then on our first lesson already know a little bit about my background and my level on the language and so on and so forth. But what has happened to me sometimes is that I'd get to this first class and the teacher would start asking me questions such as, what are your hobbies, or what are your goals with this language, and so on. When this happens, I tell to myself, man, I just told you a few days ago on that email I sent you. Like, if you're not even able to take 30 seconds of your time to have a look at it, then I can't regard you as someone who takes your job seriously, and thus it's a very big red flag. Well, probably more than a red flag, this would be a straight no-go. The second red flag I see quite often is a teacher without a plan. So at some point during this first class, I'm expecting the teacher to let me know about how he's gonna go about the lessons. I'm expecting her to tell me what we're going to do in the upcoming days, what type of method she usually follows, or to ask me something specific about my language learning goals. Quite often though, the teacher will not do any of these. They might just ask me a little bit about myself and then just start teaching. Sometimes we even reach the end of the lesson and they don't even tell me what I have to prepare for the next class. In those cases, it's a pretty big red flag. The third warning sign arises when the teacher does not have language learning material at hand. During the first conversation with the instructor, I usually ask what kind of materials we're going to use during the classes, as well as if he or she has some extra reading materials available, such as books or magazines. What has happened to me relatively often is that the instructor will either have quite deplorable materials for the lessons, or they might not be able to provide additional materials for reading. This is quite problematic because I'd have to spend some time looking for these materials on my own and sometimes paying for them. And I certainly don't want to go through that, plus I would expect a good teacher to have loads of materials available. So if they don't have it, then red flag, or maybe again a straight no-go. So I just told you the 3 main warning signs I try to detect whenever I have this first interaction with a teacher. Those are the things that would probably prompt me to discard an instructor straight away, but I've not told you about the features I really look forward to having on a teacher. There are many traits I can think of when I try to imagine the sort of ideal teacher I'd like to have. But I would say that the most relevant one is to find an instructor that is friendly, someone you get along with. The reason being that the relationship you have with your teacher is going to have a big impact on your motivation. Because think of it, you have to spend loads of time with this person because it's a one-to-one session. So this instructor has the full responsibility of making the classes interactive and fun. If you find someone who is not that entertaining or with whom you don't get along that well, then probably it would be a good idea to just discard him. At least this has to be the case for me. So if I'm not having fun in the classes or I'm not really enjoying the conversations with my instructor, then I certainly feel that I'm not very motivated to keep on going with it. So whenever I have this first interaction with a language coach, I really try to think of if I got along with this person or not. So after having this first class with the different teachers, thinking about what things I liked about them and which things I didn't, and trying to weigh them up to each other, I finally have to make a choice. Usually the call is pretty clear, so in most of the cases, one of the teachers has been better than the others. In some of the instances, I might have some doubts about my final choice. In those cases, I'll probably try out 2 more teachers and then decide. When I'm not satisfied with any of the people I've had classes with, I'll certainly keep trying out new teachers until I find the ideal one. And I would encourage you to do the same. As Jeff Bezos said, I'd rather interview 50 people and not hire anyone than hire the wrong person. Alright, that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If that was the case, don't forget to leave it a like, subscribe, and hit on the bell button. Thank you, and see you in a few days.